Hello, everybody, and welcome to Some Patches Required, a show where we hope to educate and entertain you on the ever-turbulent games industry. As always, I am one of your hosts, Aaron.
I am the other host, Zach.
And before we dive into our main topic, I would just like to extend a huge thank you to all of our returning listeners and a just marginally larger thank you to our new listeners. If you'd like to, please feel free to follow us on our social media channels, Twitter, and whatnot, as well as give us a like on your favorite podcatcher of choice. Leave us a review, preferably a positive one, but a negative one can only help us improve, so if you feel so inclined, I suppose I can't stop you. Outside of that, we are actually going to be talking about the semi-recent announcement of the Apple Vision Pro. I didn't say VR Pro, Zach.
I'm proud
Give me credit
of you.
for that one. Because we are wondering if it is actually going to be a watershed moment for the AR, VR, MR sort of business realm and how it integrates into our lives and how it is compatible or not compatible with gaming.
Yeah, and I think the best way to handle it is we'll just do a quick and dirty run through for those that don't know about the Apple Vision Pro. It's basically a mixed reality headset. Mixed reality just meaning that it's a mix of virtual reality and augmented reality. And it comes in at a whopping price point of around $3,000. It's $3,500, I believe, right? Or is it $2,500?
Oh, it's $3,500. It is.
Yeah, that's
$335 American dollars.
Yeah. No, it's a hefty boy, 3.5K. And I mean, it's a pretty interesting headset overall, I would say. I mean, it's got 23 million pixels in the size of a postage stamp. So that's basically like a 4K TV for each of your eyes. That's literal phrasing that they use, of course.
Yep.
It's a dual chip headset. So it's got like, it's got two processors in it. And what I will say about that is Apple does actually have some really, really cool and powerful processors. So I think this will be like a pretty impressive piece of equipment when it comes to actual fidelity, actually functioning as a machine. And then what else is important randomly? I mean, we'll get into a lot of it, but they, I think, interestingly hit on a lot of consumer use cases that were not gaming. And that was kind of interesting as we'll delve into that later. But yeah, it's Apple's new VR headset is basically what we're going to be talking about today and whether or not it's actually going to make a difference for the space overall.
Yeah, because I mean, largely one of the things I find really interesting about this headset is that, I mean, my big question regarding the headset is who is it actually for? And who is going to pay $3,500 American dollars for it? And why would they do that? But one of the other interesting things is it does seem to be positioning itself as more of like a lifestyle and productivity item rather than something that is dedicated to gaming. So I would compare it more to an Apple Watch in that sense. But it does seem to have a lot of hype and a lot of potential. And we just kind of wanted to delve into some of the, VR, AR gaming, either successes or snafus, and VR, AR experience in general, snafus and successes that have stopped VR from becoming the huge monolith that people kind of expected it would be once it started taking off in a fairly niche environment. So yeah, it's definitely interesting time to be launching this. And one has to wonder if Apple is the right uh business to actually deliver on that, and could their involvement actually elevate this whole thing out of kind of the doldrums that it's been in, even though it's still making money and all that fun stuff. But the entire VR AR market has been hit and miss, largely.
Well, I think the interesting with the thing with the VR market, or I would even just say maybe MR, because I don't know that there's like a meaningful distinction between the two, is it's actually worth more than what I even thought it was. So I think it's $31 million was what was listed on that Forbes article that you shot over my way. And I
Yeah.
mean, 31 million, like truthfully, among all the different companies that are in that segment, isn't that impressive. I mean, just as an example, I'm trying to remember I'm trying to look here. 2020, that's right. I believe this is up to 2020. So in 2020, mobile games was worth about $85 billion. So like, slight difference there. It's definitely a niche market segment for sure. But that was more than I even thought it would be worth. But I mean, part of that I think is because of some of the limitations, Aaron, that you and I have run into when we're talking about VR, AR, MR. Even from like a development perspective, but also as like a consumer. I think like one of the biggest ones that's always prevented me from getting it as a actual consumer has been the fact that it's basically it's a add-on piece of hardware for an already expensive piece of hardware in most cases, right? Like I think in the cheapest case, you're getting like a VR headset for your PlayStation. So you're getting like PSVR or something like that. And that's going to be typically more on the cheaper end. But outside of that, you're going to have a computer that's capable of running VR and then get a VR peripheral for that, which is of course the headset. And I mean, the investment in that can be, you're looking at over $1,000 easy.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, not to do a full counterpoint on that exactly, because I completely agree. Because to clarify, the Vision Pro, man, I really just have to stop myself from saying VR Pro every single time. The Vision Pro, $3,500. That is expensive for a toy. But even the PlayStation VR 2 runs $550, and a PlayStation 5 disc version runs $500 if you're not buying a bundle. So you're still talking over $1,000. If you were trying to run the original HTC Vive or something like that on a computer, or the original Oculus Rift or something like that, you needed a pretty hefty computer to even be able to process any of that. So as a standalone device, it is still on the high end of the market, but Apple has never been known for affordability in its products, I would say. So I can kind of see where the price point would make a little bit of sense if the experience that it delivers is equivalent to purchasing something like an HTC Vive, or what's the newest one they just made. Also, I do apologize for clicking if there's any. The Vive XR Elite, which apparently just did really well at CES. That's $1,100, but it needs, I believe, some form of tethering, which is another component. I think it can be standalone, but I think you can do either. It's a or the original HTC Vive, which was about $1,200 or something like that, and adding that to a $1,500 computer brings it closer in line than something like a PS5 and a PSVR 2. But again, the PSVR 2 is a strictly gaming focused headset, right? I mean, you can load the Netflix app down on your PS5 and watch Netflix, but it's obviously not going to be, unless you're one of the many people who have YouTube channels or some stuff that like to, mod stuff beyond all reason in order to make things work together. The PSVR 2 is just going to be connected to a PS5, which you already have to have. So it's a challenge there in terms of like cost versus functionality in that sense.
I mean, I think the one thing that is worth some clarification that I didn't mention in the beginning is that yes, the Vision Pro is a standalone headset, which makes it more akin to a Quest, because the Quest is for those that don't know, that's Facebook's headset. The Quest is a standalone headset. They market it more towards gaming, but the reality is that people still view a lot of these, and this is the important thing, right? So like, why is VR not taking off? I don't think it I mean, yes, the gaming portion that you mentioned does matter to a degree, but I think people still view these as expensive pieces of hardware, right? Like that is the first point, right? And the interesting thing is that Quest 2 brings it more within a reasonable price range, because you're looking at something that's like $300 or, sub $400 when you're looking at the Quest. And that's more reasonable. Like that's more within the console price threshold. But then the problem becomes, another problem for VR is that there's still not a lot of games that are games, right? So you've got like Beat Saber, you've got Half-Life Alyx, you've got I know Bone Labs is something that people play a decent amount. There's VR Chat. But my point here is like there's a lot of things that still feel kind of like tech demos or experiences, but they don't really have the replayability of a lot of video games that are on more traditional consoles. So I'd say that that's another factor that's really limited the VR space, outside of the fact that a lot of people still view these as like really expensive peripheral devices.
Which, in effect, I don't honestly disagree with that perspective. It's a different way to experience some games, but certainly not all games. And I had a friend who used to love playing on the original PlayStation VR, just doing like the theater mode situation where you just make a big flat screen and you can play your games in the VR headset. And my question with that is that's just novelty. The novelty of playing on a large virtual screen is not appealing to me personally. Maybe it's appealing to other people, but a lot of the VR experiences, like when I played Resident Evil 7 in VR, it was a bad time for Aaron. Aaron is a large baby man, and he did not particularly enjoy that experience, even though it was exceptionally well delivered. It just made me so scared because I'm a baby man. But yeah, I don't know, it's interesting. I do think to some degree that the focus on gaming specifically, despite how large the industry is, the focus on gaming actually is something that might have hamstrung VR headsets from reaching mainstream appeal, that and technology, as opposed to what it seems like Apple is doing, which is approaching it as a lifestyle brand to some degree.
Yeah.
Where I also agree with you about the fact that a lot of VR games feel a lot more like experiences than games. Beat Saber is an obvious standout. There are a couple of other VR games that you can point out as being like exceptionally good at selling you on the idea that this can be a mainstream idea, but they are still just expensive peripherals. I don't know if this one's going to change that, but I suppose we'll get to that a little bit later down in the conversation.
Well, I think one, yes, I definitely 100% agree that I think one of the limitations for VR and mixed reality in general has been that you can only get so much out of the gaming market, right? Like imagine selling a phone as a gaming device. Like, no, that's stupid. You're not going to sell a phone off of gaming. Like, it's not the primary use case for a phone. It's not solving the primary issues that a phone can solve for. So you would like be stringing yourself. I think that really what's going to lead to a lot of success and breakthrough, and even potentially justify some of the things that I've already mentioned, you know, with like the price specifically, is if they can really find use cases that resonate with people and get people to break out of the idea of just thinking a headset is for gaming. I think that's really the only way that it's going to be successful. But I think the other important thing that some people may not necessarily know about, that definitely is a limiting factor, at least for me as well, is... I thought you were actually going to say this when you were talking about Resident Evil, but you were talking about it just being scary. Nausea.
Because it was very scary.
Nausea, motion sickness. Well, I mean,
yeah.
I can't play a lot of VR games. I probably couldn't play Resident Evil because I'd probably get motion sick. I'd probably want to vomit. Because depending on the movement that you have in VR games, like you can get very, very motion sick. I think too, just playing them over a long course of time, I get a little sick.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And on that note, not to make it sound like I'm self-aggrandizing, but I did spend a lot of time actually developing for the original HTC Vive. The motion tracking was occasionally a little bit faulty, even when we kind of jury-rigged up a system with 4 cameras inside of the motion capture studio. And then we were trying to develop, you know, an educational experience. Hand tracking at that time was not good, but the worst part of it was actually trying to figure out a way for movement to make sense. So I actually spent about 2 months, I believe, working on just researching ways to reduce motion sickness through the movement aspect, because a lot of the time the motion sickness comes from the music. Or not the music, the movement. Sorry. The motion sickness can come from the music, depending on what the music is, and how hard you dance. But it was a long process of trying to figure out. Okay, there's a cognitive dissonance and a physical dissonance when you're using a controller to move a character that you're looking through their eyes. You're standing or sitting completely still, and you're moving at normal speed, and that's just tremendously disorienting, and it doesn't feel good. So some people have implemented what I like to call a snap feature, where they've limited the full range of motion of the camera stick, where instead of smoothing that motion, it'll actually just snap, and that kind of helps to break that a little bit. I didn't love that one. I ended up purchasing... the teleporting one? Well, the teleporting one is actually the one I landed on as the best for actual movement, especially for an educational sort of experience. I found that was the least disorienting overall. Mm-hmm. But the worst experience I've had with that was there was it was basically a disc. I'm not sure if anyone remembers these, but they used to sell these toys basically that you could hook up to your TV, and it had one game on it. And the one I had was a snowboarding game. And you could place this little like plastic snowboard down into a disc with a couple sets of buttons around the side. This makes me sound ancient, but this is completely true. And you would use the snowboard as a controller as you're looking at the screen. And it made you feel like you were snowboarding. You know, you needed to turn this way, needed to turn this way. And the motion that you're seeing felt natural because your feet were doing exactly that. So I did some research, and I found this disc that was attempting to do the exact same thing for people, you know, sitting down at their computer with an Oculus or a Vive or something like that. And I got the university to approve purchasing one of them. They shipped us 4, which I think they just wanted to get them out of the warehouse at that point. And then I spent some time integrating that into some of the games that I was going to demo it on. And within 15 minutes, I was laying under my desk trying not to barf. And I'm not normally prone to motion sickness. Because So my
Awful.
boss comes in and he's just my boss comes in and he's just like, "You good, bud?" And I'm like,
Fuck
"I don't
no.
think this is gonna work." The entire idea behind it is that the disc will calibrate, and if you lean forward on it, it will simulate forward movement. And the idea being that, since your feet, legs, and general body are actually propelling you forward in some way, there will be an attachment there. And for me, that just didn't work. First off, it wasn't accurate. Second off, it made me the barfiest I've ever felt playing a VR game. So that one stunk on ice. But the teleportation one is, I think, the least elegant but most effective version of movement in VR. But just the fact that we've needed to spend this much time talking about this means that is a huge, huge issue with VR gaming in general. Skyrim VR on the PSVR, which I actually have, is, I would say, generously clunky.
Well, that's like all
it's
those. That's all those games that have no right to be VR, in my opinion. People are just like, "Oh, this is an RPG. We could make this VR. This would be fun." And
yeah,
it's
just
like
put
it wasn't made
it's
to be VR.
it's first person, so yeah, but the thing is, you don't have a bespoke Skyrim for VR. You have Skyrim ported to VR because there's just, I don't think, enough of a market to make a game with that sizable budget and expect a suitable return on investment for something like that. So yeah, those feel almost gimmicky in a sense. And it's just a limitation of the hardware, which I will actually get to with the Vision Pro as well, because I have some very strong thoughts on its gaming potential. But the other thing that I've noticed, and one of the things that we actually really had to work around when I was working for the university, when we were setting up our room scale VR, was the tethering aspect, which was an early VR issue for sure. Our solution was to end up like jury rigging some stuff on the stunt grid above us using basically extendable dog leashes, the ones that spool out from that fun looking handle, and attach that to that from a thing that we had to like climb up on ladders for an hour and a half and swing over in the correct direction and make sure that it was going to work. And the tethering aspect was always a problem for room scale VR. And when you remove the tether, room scale VR becomes world scale VR, or AR, or MR, or XR, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. But that was definitely an issue for early adoption. People tripping over their cables, people not being able to see because the pass-through, which is when you can actually turn on a camera to see what's going on in front of you, since you're in a digital environment, a mapped out room.
Well, you'd also need an entire room for the thing. You'd literally need an entire room because you had to have the sensors up on.
Yes,
at least with the Vive, you had to have the sensors up. Yeah, there were a lot.
Yeah,
of hardware.
Oculus was slower on that one, for sure, to get to room scale. But now that these untethered ones are there, it makes sense to move to more of a mixed reality or augmented reality environment. And then you can more or less move everywhere or anywhere. But I'm not sure what the full appeal of that is in its current state. But that was certainly a thing. And then with this newer generation, since we've removed the tethering, by and large, from these headsets, it's now battery life is a huge concern.
Yeah, I feel like we're definitely, the sad thing is, compared to even, so what, that was like, I was doing VR development, it was like 4 years ago. We've gotten like so many advances in a lot of the tech. Like the headsets now are way more impressive than the ones that we would have been developing for in college. Totally. But it's still just like, it's just weird, Right. Like I think I think some of the perceptions of VR still haven't changed. Like I think some people still view them as these like really clunky things that have wires sometimes and whatnot. Obviously you mentioned the game issue. That's a huge one. But I don't know. I think to kind of, we mentioned some of the issues. I'm sure that I'm missing some that just aren't coming to mind to me right now. Bad resolution is something that kind of bugged
bad
me.
resolution has always been an issue. You remember those Omnitrack treadmills?
Yeah. Well, I remember. They tried to hire me for a position, and I was like, I don't think I'm gonna do that. But yes, I do know what you're talking about. But that's even more ridiculous because talk about needing a whole room, right? You'd need a fucking treadmill in your home. Those things
were several $1,000s too.
Yeah.
And I remember when we ordered them, we were all really excited, and then a year and a half later, they still hadn't arrived. And I was like, I guess this could reduce some of the motion sickness issue, but at literally, and I do mean literally in the sense of the way that the word is meant to be used, literally, what is the additional cost to make this functional? And that was wild to me. But yeah, I mean, there's just so many things that have kept VR, AR, and MR from making it to the mainstream. And again, back to battery life, and I'll let you continue. One of the other things that I worked with a lot at the Immersive Media Institute was the Microsoft HoloLens, which was a full AR headset. The resolution was dump, but the technology was amazing. But the battery life was maybe 2.5, 3 hours.
They're going to be like minutes.
that made it really hard to function a 4 or 5 hour tour because we were only able to get one token, or one license rather, for a HoloLens, because you actually needed to apply to get a HoloLens. You couldn't just buy one; you had to apply to get one, because it was basically a dev kit at that point.
Well, I mean, I remember I tried the HoloLens when we had it in the lab one time, and so one, I think the fact that we're going towards MR, which is of course what the Apple Vision Pro is, I think one of the benefits of that is AR has been so underutilized, and I think a lot of that is that it's just more expensive. Which I never really, and still candidly don't understand the full scope of. Like, I always thought, AR would maybe be easier, but it's because you have to like recognize what's a wall and what's a floor and all these other things in your space. Like, you don't necessarily need to do that in VR. It's not quite the same. So, that's part of it. But anyway, like, AR fixes so many of the issues with VR, in my opinion. Like, we're talking motion sickness, right? Because you can actually see some of your real environment and move around without bumping or shoving your shin into a desk or something. Like,
yeah, and it's untethered. You're not going to knock over your computer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at this point, we are past tethered. At least when it comes to
we're completely past tethered.
Yeah.
And also, I was incorrect. The newest Vive XR Pro, or whatever the hell it's called, is actually standalone untethered.
Yeah, most of them are. But thank God, by the way.
Not with Lenovo.
Oh, well, poor Lenovo.
There are a couple of Lenovo ones that I spent way too much time looking into that are still tethered.
Well, I feel like a lot of that has to do, this is a side tangent, but I think a lot of that has to do with how much power is in the headset versus how much it has to rely on the computer.
Exactly. Nope, that's not a side tangent. That is 100% right, and it relates to battery life. Congratulations. We're finally good at having conversations on this podcast that we've been doing for several years.
Yeah, at this point, which is still crazy. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, to kind of get into it, we've talked about some of the issues. I am of the opinion, I think that the Apple Vision Pro in its current iteration as a consumer product is not going to be successful, but I don't think that's the point. And I do think that the Apple Vision Pro is going to be a big deal, mostly because I think that Apple is good at getting people excited about the use cases that they mentioned, right? Like you listed a Forbes article. They were kind of talking like, oh, these are things you can already do. Completely true. Super valid. But the fact is Apple is just very good at marketing. And I think that Apple's marketing is going to set a precedent for how we talk about VR. Or in their case, they refuse to say VR. They keep calling it spatial computing.
Yeah. Well, that's also another thing. I'm glad you brought that up because that's another thing that Apple's really good at is forming their own terms for things to differentiate themselves in the market. They won't say this is a mixed reality headset. They'll say this is the era of spatial computing. Which one sounds more exciting?
I'd have to go with the era of
Yeah,
computing.
exactly. It's intelligent marketing. It's just intelligent marketing. Not that I love it, but it is intelligent marketing.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting thing. Was it Marquis? I think it was Marquise Brownlee. Was talking about how Apple like always comes up with their own words for things. They never want to like adopt something else because they want to control the narrative of it. And this is definitely an example of that. And
to the extreme, yeah.
You were saying like, who is this headset for? I mean, it's 100% early adopters. No one is going to buy this thing for $3,500. That's just like a normal VR person. Like this is 110% for enthusiasts. And like, we'll see what ends up happening, with a bunch of it. But like, I know they didn't focus on games as much. I know this is a point that, I think you were going to bring up. They didn't focus on games as much, but like there are going to be games on this. I mean, they specifically in the showcase brought up the fact that, they're in partnership with Unity, to bring over every app that is Unity made. Like this thing is going to have a bunch of games on it.
Over 100 plus confirmed Apple Arcade games.
Yeah.
And at the very least, DualSense controller support.
Which, thank God they're going to add a controller to this thing because, like, it's cool that you can control everything without haptics, but, like, haptics help, like, a ton. Like, I couldn't imagine playing a lot of games just using my, like pinching.
Yeah. This is one of those moments where I was actually going to hold off on this, but I suppose I'll just do it now. Where the lack of controller initially confused me if they were going for gaming in any tangible sense. And I actually will just not launch into it. I'll bring it up in a little bit, but the big concern there is how many controllers will be supported. Will it be any Bluetooth controller? Will it just be the DualSense? In which case, if you don't already have a PS5, you're going to be shelling out $70, $75 for a controller for a console you don't own so that you can play the Apple Arcade version of the NBA 2K23. Like, that's for the next bit, but that does bring up the question again: who is this actually for?
Well, that's what I was saying. I think it's for the early adopters, 100%.
Right, right.
I don't think it's gonna attract mass appeal by any measure because it's just like develop this first expensive version. They're going to make a cheaper version, but you're always going to pay the Apple tax regardless. Like I think you hinted at this earlier, but you hit the nail on the head. Like this is always going to be a bit of a premium product because you're going to be paying for the fact that it's Apple. Also, the materials that they're using in it are apparently heavier, which is either
aluminum as opposed to plastic.
Yeah, they use higher quality materials, which sounds good at face value, but like it's heavier. Like a lot of the reason other people don't use air quotes higher quality materials is because this thing's on your goddamn head. Like,
yeah,
you don't want to wear a brick on your face constantly.
No, I mean I honestly don't. Even those little bricks that have holes that you could, depending on where your eyes are put, reasonably look through and see the world through a brick.
Yeah.
I don't ever wear those on my face.
Well, it's kind of funny that you bring that up, right? Because actually that's kind of in and of itself a limitation of all the headsets that exist now too. And the Vision Pro isn't really fixing this issue, which is you kind of look like a dork. Like you're not going to be strolling around with this thing.
That's what killed Google Glass. And it again, there was actually a whole period of time where people who would walk around with Google Glass, people would call glass holes. That's not even a joke. It's a real thing. And one of the things in the video that you brought up by Marquise was the idea of like, because they're showing these like nice, imagine
you're gonna bring up the camera.
Kind of cinematography for like heartburn medicine or something like that, and it's like oh man, my heartburn was so bad I could barely play with my children, but now. And then they're playing in the yard and everything. And it's like, now I have the freedom to move freely without fear. And it's, an ad for, like Robitussin. And that was kind of the vibe that I got from those scenes. And the Marquise brought this up when they were saying like, but you're doing that wearing a headset and you're filming in 3D so that you can rewatch this in the headset.
Hell yeah.
And how is that going to change the tenor of your child's birthday party? You want to, you have to fly out to Botswana for a business trip, and you're going to bring your headset with you. Cool. And you're going to rewatch your kid's birthday party. And I actually, personally, this is just a personal anecdote, and I will move along from this. I have a big problem with people staging candid photos.
Well, wait. Okay, so I like listening. I know exactly what you're talking about, but with the Robitussin ad, so basically you're talking about the like 3D video that you can take.
Yeah,
like,
there's 3D video involved in this.
Yes. Yeah. Which you're talking about how
we're doing a Minority Report.
Well, and how ridiculous you would look. Like, Dad, Mom, can you get Dad to take off the headset? He's recording me again. You just see his like beady eyes.
Honey, blow out. No, I'm talking about. Honey, blow out the candles. Blow out the candles, honey.
Dad,
it's
can
your
you take the headset
birthday. You're
off
6
first?
Today, and you're wearing some Ready Player One shit on your face. And you're like, I love you so much.
You can't even see your dad's eyes. You just see the cold exterior of the
digital
headset.
Display of his eyes that they're really proud of. That's all you can see. That it's so dystopian in nature that it actually is off-putting to me.
Oh yeah, it's not even your real
with,
eyes.
Staged candid photos, because you don't ever remember the moment if you're taking a picture of it. And you're not in the photo, and if you're in the photo, then it's staged.
Well, so those are just going to be glued onto your face, Aaron, so you can just remember every moment of your life when you're dying.
With a 2-hour battery life, I'm not sure it's going to be glued onto my face for very long. I'll remove skin to get that fucker off of there. At that point...
Well, soon they'll just do like the Matrix thing, and your own body will power it. Even though a potato is better
Elon Musk will get there eventually. He's Elon Musk. But
yes, no, very weird.
That's my point with that side of things is I'm like, okay, that use case just seems like a bad selling point.
Well, I think it's actually cool. Like, I think that's actually kind of neat.
No, I think it's incredible technology. Yeah. I just think that like
the dad's using it at the birthday party is a little weird. Yes.
The dad using it at the birthday party is weird. Who is going to, like, hold on, before you blow out the candles, let me go grab the separate battery pack for my headset that I'm going to wear as I watch you, my daughter, through a digital filter blow out her candles on her actual birthday, I find weird.
You know what it's going to be eventually, Aaron, is because they have that tech that scans your face. What they really should have shown is everybody with the headset on, but it like does that like 3D rendered face. Well, no, it does like the FaceTime like 3D scan, so it's like your like
Yeah, no,
uncanny valley daughter's face on because she has her
Oh.
headset on. Everybody, the whole family has their headset on, so it's their real body in this like 3D rendered model face. That'd be great.
Someone
I love
mods
that.
it to look just like terrible CGI Grand Moff Tarkin. Uh, everyone just looks like terrible CGI Grand Moff Tarkin. Anyway, no, but I mean, like, that's a weird feature. But if we're talking about use case, here's where I'll actually give some credit to the HoloLens, because I know, Zach, you and I had actually talked about the HoloLens, and you thought it was dead. No, you can still buy a HoloLens, too.
Well, I thought it was
And you
just
can actually
industrial.
buy 3 different editions of it.
Yeah.
And there's one, and I kid you not, is actually attached to a hard hat.
Well,
it costs $5,200.
Yeah, I mean that sounds about right. But like all these devices are getting marketed to industrial company, like design companies.
See,
so
now that's actually where I was going. Aside from the inexplicable cost and necessary hard hat, I actually think that the HoloLens is effectively marketing their product to the right people at the right price point, right? So I mean, it is very expensive, but if a company needs engineers to be able to visualize things Minority Report or Tony Stark style, a HoloLens is, and that's always kind of been the jam up until the Surface, the Microsoft Surface came out, is that, Microsoft products are for productivity and function, and Apple products are for that, but also design, and also entertainment, and also artistry, and also style, and also fun, and all of these, different various lifestyle sides of things. Microsoft is what an accountant uses. An Apple device is what an audio editor would perhaps choose, depending on which audio editor you talk to or which school you go to. It's a complete difference in the way that it's being marketed, because the HoloLens 2 is not being marketed basically at all. It's being, told to those people more or less directly. They're not hosting showcases to show off that cool technology. They're saying like, okay, you're a business, you might be able to use this. We've built a tool for you to use this for. That's not what the Vision Pro is. The Vision Pro is supposed to be the iPhone you wear on your face.
Well, I mean, it's because
the Apple Watch you wear on each eye.
So the reality of, what Apple wants, though, is because, so if we go back to just VR in general, and why they want to reevaluate that and call it spatial computing, is because in 2020, it's like the games industry was roughly $165 billion, which is a lot of money, right? But I don't know what the cell phone industry looks like. But if they like pose this as a replacement to a computer or, some other kind of device, I'm sure that gets them, one, a lot of revenue from games, but it also helps them diversify the product into some other like market segments. So like I completely understand what they're doing. I mean, they're definitely targeting this to industry too. Like Apple's not gonna be dumb. They're gonna compete in industrial use cases as well. I'm sure
totally.
They are. But
they made it fashionable, which the HoloLens is not.
Yeah, no, 100. I mean, yeah, it's got a hard hat attached to it in the one version. So you're definitely right. I mean, ultimately, I feel like I've been ragging on it in this last segment when I'm trying to talk about why I actually like it a lot. But, I think even though in reality, a lot of the use cases that they mentioned are just kind of neat and definitely not worth $3.5K, I think it does illustrate, especially when you look at the hype of everything for the most part. This has been hyped up constantly. Like,
oh yeah,
I think this headset's going to end up being success. Not this iteration of it because it's so goddamn expensive, but I do think that the Apple Vision Pro 2, or whatever the heck it ends up being called, the cheaper version, I think that's going to end up doing well because it sets a precedent on how to talk about VR in a way that gets people excited. And I think right now, that's just not the case. I think
No.
people aren't. I mean, like the Quest 3 comes out here soon, and I don't think there's going to be the same kind of buzz around it, even though I've heard incredibly good things about the Meta Quest. So if you're interested in the headset.
The Quest 3 seems like a very it seems like a very interesting headset. It seems like a very functional headset. It's something that if I had the fungible assets to upgrade my PC to the degree that I'd like, even if I don't need the PC for it, if I had the money to buy one, I feel like it would be, a pretty successful thing in my life. But how much would I use it? Would it really impact me, considering what we're talking about with a lot of the games that are in VR aren't you don't play a game in VR the same way that you do in just your normal space, which is where I think if they manage to strike some absolutely revolutionary licensing deals, listen to our previous episode on music licensing, the Apple Vision, Apple Vision Pro, could actually maybe kind of snag some of that, but they'd have to be able to, find support for these large consoles, because Apple Arcade, 100 games it sounds like a lot. It ain't that many games.
Well, they'll have integrations with the App Store and
in the App Store, yeah. But do you want to play a mobile game on your phone? Which goes back to the who is this for and why would I buy it? So I'm going to back up for like 5 seconds and say that I have a conspiracy theory, which you and I were talking about. My conspiracy theory that I'd like to put out in the world and further contaminate everybody's cognitive ability to realize logic is I think that the price point is where it's at because they don't expect it to sell very many units in version 0. We're selling a $3,500 prototype to see if the people who actually buy it like it. So let's make the price point high enough that we can recuperate a lot of our R&D and development costs. That's what I think, because I think they have plans to take this thing a lot further, make it a lot more streamlined. That's my conspiracy theory.
I mean, I don't even necessarily know if that's a conspiracy theory. I mean, it's just the early adopter thing. It's
right. It's the idea is like let's price this thing high. If there's enough demand, we'll go for it, and really push this, version 2 out, and maybe even charge less for slightly better technology, and the hopes that volume outweighs cost. Because if you sell one sandwich at $3,500 or 50 sandwiches at $100, the math there is not good, but the idea being no one's going to buy the $3,500 sandwich, but more than 50 people will buy the $50 sandwich. And no one should sell a sandwich for $50 unless you're fucking Gordon Ramsay and you just need to buy a 4th house. But I think ultimately my big concern as we rapidly approach the end of this is, so the two questions are, is this for gaming, and will this be actually a watershed moment for the VR AR industry and MR and whatnot? My opinion on it is I think you're much more enthusiastic.
I mean, the reception for this headset has been incredibly positive for the most part. It's going to be the best looking headset.
Yes,
in terms of visual fidelity,
without a single whiff of doubt.
Yeah.
Yes,
and the eye tracking is apparently spot on, like creepily good. Same thing with the hand controls. I think that the headset is a watershed moment, not because it needs to be successful, but because it pushes other headsets to have to change and meet Apple where they're going. I don't think anybody can look at the Apple Vision Pro as a competitor and say, we're not going to be like that. I mean, you could, but you're limiting yourself to the existing VR market segment. And I just do not think it's very big. It's 31 million right now, roughly.
Yeah.
And it's just tiny. You need to branch out of that if you want to make any real money. And the only people that are really going to push that right now are Apple. Like, they're the only ones doing it. And like I said, I don't think this headset will be successful in a financial sense, but I think it just builds a precedent because the technology is so impressive, because the visuals are pushing the cutting edge so much. Like, this headset is impressive by all means. Is it mass adoption ready? By no means is it that.
No.
But I just think, like, we have not had a piece of hardware that has gathered this much interest from the general population. And as much as people may want to meme on it and say, oh, you could do all this stuff forever, right? With the visual computing and whatnot. The reality is that no one's got the market as excited as Apple has. It doesn't matter. You know, we've seen time and time again, like, people come in and disrupt the market even when things have previously existed, right? Or what was it? Is it VHS versus CD or something? I don't remember. It was whichever thing
it was
happened.
DVD versus Laserdisc, and then Blu-ray versus HD DVD.
Well, it was whichever one porn basically made popular. One of them was like inferior to the other, but it won out because of porn.
Betamax.
Was that what it was?
Betamax.
Yeah. So, I mean, anyway, my point being is, like, it doesn't matter, like, all these rules, you know, who got there first, yada, yada, yada. It doesn't matter if you can't market your product. Apple is great at marketing their product. Dumb people. Dumb people are going to look at it and be like, ooh, spatial computing is completely different, even though it's not. Like, I understand the cynicism, but, like, Apple's just so good at marketing. And this headset is candidly just so impressive that I think it's going to have to push other headsets to stand up and really up their game. I think it also will kill a lot of headsets. There's so many headsets out right now. Like, there's so much competition. I think there's going to be a lot of die-off.
I have 15 tabs open just with, you know, descriptions of some of these that I did in preparation for this episode. And I mean, realistically, I think you're completely right about the marketing and the impressiveness of the technology. I think I'm right, and you are also right in the sense that it might not be a commercially successful product because $3,500 is it's not like Apple's phones are cheap, right? But
they're not $3,500.
The use case here to me just doesn't resonate with me personally. I can't speak to everybody else. And if I had a bunch of money, I would love to play around with one of these things. I think that would be awesome. But why on earth, when I already have a physical keyboard and a 53 flat inch television screen, would I want to put on goggles and play games on Apple Arcade, which, by the way, is a subscription service that you need to pay extra for, unless they include a voucher to give you free access for, I'm assuming, a trial period.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I wear goggles to play a game for 2 hours? Why? I mean, to make the screen bigger? And, you know, even if I'm using the DualSense controller to play that game, you know, yeah, great DualSense controller. Are the haptics going to be in there? Are those going to be coded in? Because those have to be coded into the games in order to communicate with the DualSense, which is what makes the DualSense. And if I'm going to watch a movie, what if I wanted to watch the upcoming Scorsese film Killers of the Flower Moon, which is well over 2.5 hours long? Well, now I have to go buy a power bank. I just don't see the broad appeal there. One of their big selling points is the idea of mirroring your MacBook screen if you sync them up and being able to work off of that. If I have to use a virtual keyboard, regardless of how impressive the technology is, I don't want to do that. And if I'm going to be playing a game without a controller, how am I going to control the game just pointing? There's no way that that's as accurate as a controller, so the experience is going to be worse. And I don't love that, and I can only do it for 2 hours unless I buy a power bank, which adds to the cost. So I don't fully see this as being a watershed moment. I see it being the first drop in a waterfall. Because I do think this headset is going to require it's going to inspire, rather, other headset makers, HTC and Meta and whatnot, to up their game a little bit in terms of design and technology if they have the funds, because the technology seems legitimately impressive. I just don't see how I would integrate this into my life in a meaningful way in its current form. Because if I was sitting next to somebody on an airplane wearing one of these and laughing while looking up, I can't envision that being anything other than bizarre, just to see at the moment. So I think the watershed moment's actually going to come at 2, and I think for gaming, they're either going to have to strike some licensing deals, or they're going to have to make their own games at a pretty aggressive rate. And I know they've been doing a lot of investing in the games industry as well, but I just don't see this particular headset being a huge player in that space. However, and sorry for monologuing, something I have never been known to do, of course. No, who would say that? I do think that it will be more successful just because Apple's brand strength is so strong. Like they really honestly do have so much clout and so much appeal, to the point where, I've had people ask me what kind of phone I had, and I said, Google Pixel, and they're like, loser. Because I didn't have an iPhone. And they have that sort of cachet in the tech industry that I think they can carry this thing off and completely change the industry. I just don't think that they were ever planning on this being a massive success. Again, you're not going to walk into a Verizon store and see this.
Well, I don't think it needs to be a massive success.
It doesn't need to be
a watershed. And
it
also,
just needs to be liked.
I just, my thought is, I think a lot of the value that you place on it is from the game's perspective, which is valid, right? Like, that is where you would see the value in a headset. I think for most consumers, though, what's going to make our parents excited, what's going to make older generations excited is not gaming. It like isn't going to be that. Right. So I think a lot of that stuff isn't going to matter. And with like the productivity, I'm pretty sure it's not a virtual keyboard. I think you can use that, but I think you can just use your laptop keyboard for that.
I completely agree with you. I actually think that Apple was very intelligent by minimizing gameplay in this, because so many of the headsets that have, sold well and they've, gotten different iterations and whatnot, have been largely focused on gaming with a side dish of productivity. This one is productivity and lifestyle with a side dish of gaming. That's how you get into the larger mainstream market, and I think that's a brilliant tactic. I think that's actually the way that this makes it into the mainstream, and if it's a success, it will be because of that reason. additional thought on that is I have a MacBook sitting next to me right now. It is currently recording my voice through a microphone. And I don't know exactly why or how I would integrate a different screen that only lasts for 2 hours into my life so I can see it bigger.
Well,
I just don't see that being something that I personally would use every single day.
yeah. Well, I guess what I'm getting at is like, is again, it doesn't, at least in my opinion, it doesn't need to like be valuable now to you to be a like you're right. It is not generally speaking consumer ready. But like look at the Apple Watch, right? I don't really get it. I don't know why I would want an Apple Watch, but people love those things. And
they do.
They are I mean, they're not literally useless, but like they're tangibly not like what, it's a peripheral for your phone, and like people don't need watches anymore anyway. Like that thing is huge. People love their Apple Watches, and like that thing, the use cases for an Apple Watch I think are stupid, candidly. It's like a really good Fitbit, I guess. But
yeah, I mean,
people,
it's Apple's version of the Fitbit,
yeah.
which again, it's a great idea, and they marketed it exceptionally well. And Apple is the Gucci of technology in this sense.
Yeah,
you know, we're talking high end. Actually, Palmer Luckey, one of the big brains and the most visible person behind the Oculus Rift, the original one, said, I think they were really smart to go for the high-end market with this, you know, because it might not be appealing to other people. They're definitely aiming for that market, and I don't, in a rare moment, I actually don't disagree with Palmer Luckey, but it seems like I think this is, again, like I said, the first drop in the waterfall, because I do think this could be a game changer, but I don't think it was necessarily supposed to be. I think the technology will change the landscape. So I think it could be a watershed moment, but I don't think that it, I mean, I can't see myself shelling out $3,500 to make my MacBook screen bigger. I can already mirror that to a different screen.
I mean,
you know, that the use case to me is so flimsy, and I'm not about to sign up for an Apple Arcade subscription just to buy more games. And I don't know. I think ultimately the presentation is exceptional. I think the technology is extraordinary. I think that the implications that this device brings are very much game changing. But I think that the entire idea is kind of a muddled mess. It feels like I would actually rather wear Google Glass, because I could at least go to a coffee shop or some shit in a Google Glass and people might not notice that I was a glass hole, than I would, you know, walk around in one of these. Like, I just don't see it having a staying power, I guess. I don't see this particular device having staying power.
Yeah.
But it will change a lot of things within the market that it's working in.
Well, I think that it's ultimately at this point like a semantic, not that we have to agree on everything by any measure, but I think ultimately, to kind of lead towards the wrap up, I think you're saying what I'm saying. I think we're just, maybe it's a semantic difference, because when I say watershed moment, I don't think that means this headset has to be successful. I don't think that means that,
I would agree,
you know,
with that.
all these different things have to happen. I think that you saying, you know, it's the first drop in a waterfall is a watershed moment, because it changes things intrinsically, because they're coming up with this new way of marketing these headsets, because they're setting this precedent, etc. That is what I think a watershed moment is.
I would agree, and I would actually even say that, there have been several watershed moments in this situation, and if for no other reason than the marketing behind it, this headset will change the way that other headsets appear in the future. And then there will be bifurcation. People will go back towards, completely closed off VR room space headsets and say, we're this version of the Apple VR Pro, but for this. And then they'll be like, because there were phones that were coming out that were like, oh, this is the phone for gaming a while back. And they tried that, and I don't think it really worked. But it was interesting to kind of see these different markets emerge. I think Apple has approached this in a very intelligent way, and I think that by version 4 or 5 it could have already changed the world like the iPhone did.
Yeah. Well, I think
I really do think that.
I think it needs to figure out, how do I make this thing smaller and less intrusive to wear? I think that's one of the key things. In addition to that, one of the things we didn't mention, but I actually think is huge, I don't know what percentage of people need glasses of some type, but getting
well, you got one of them on here, so 50% of the podcast.
Well, it's 100% right now. I have my glasses on, but they only have specific prescription lenses for this thing right now. You can't wear glasses under the headset; it's too tight to your face. So what I'm getting at is, I think that's a pretty big limitation that they're going to have to overcome. But what I think we'll see in the future, on like kind of my closing note, I think we're going to see collapse isn't the right word. A bunch of acquisitions go on, or companies going out of business. And I think right now the two players that are poised to be successful are Meta and Apple. I think there's a lot of other headsets that are good, but I don't hear about the HTC Vive anymore. I just don't. I really don't hear about it anymore. And it's not to say it's a bad headset, but I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation. That's the word I was looking for. And I think there's going to be a lot of businesses that go out of business as VR continues to mature. And that's just kind of what
totally.
I would expect to see. But all of that being said, I think a lot of people thought that Half-Life Alyx was going to be a big watershed moment for VR. I don't really feel like it was. Like, it's an impressive game, but I don't think like there's a clear difference of VR before Half-Life Alyx came out and then after. So what I'm getting at with that is, I could be completely wrong. This could end up doing nothing for the market, this market segment. It could be a wet noodle, and Apple completely bails on it. I don't feel like they bail on stuff very often, though. So we'll see.
Not very often. Google bails so fast. They subscribe so hard to the idea of move fast and make mistakes that they burn their hardware. We talked about Stadia. It doesn't matter. No need to retread that ground. But yeah, no, I don't think Apple bails on things very hard. But no, I do think if they're, as much as, to be honest with you, I don't really actually like Apple all that much. They make exceptional but overpriced laptops. I hate their iPhone interface, but they develop an ecosystem and they market really well, and they've positioned themselves in a spot where it is a premium product, but it doesn't feel like one. If anyone's going to make this work, it's going to be Apple. Yeah. Realistically. Will it work? I don't know. Will it change things in executives' minds at other companies? Almost certainly. Will it result in several businesses either being acquired or completely shut down? Almost certainly. Yeah. So yeah, no, I think ultimately the answer to, is this a watershed moment, is
We will know in hindsight.
What I like to call, what was that?
I said we will know in hindsight.
I was gonna say it's what I like to call a firm primably, which is a fun portmanteau for probably and maybe. And there's just no definitive answer on that. I don't think it's going to be successful in the gaming space until 2 or 3 iterations down the road, or until the catalog of games available has been expanded, or until they've introduced a bespoke controller, or, you know, they've lined up a licensing deal or something like that. But no, I think this, despite its price, has the best chance of turning VR headsets away from just being exclusively productivity or exclusively gaming into a lifestyle item like a smartwatch. I think Apple is poised to do that, but not for maybe 2 more generations. So this could be the watershed moment that makes everything after that completely different. So we'll see what the world looks like in a couple of years.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably a decent point to start to wind down here.
I'm good with that.
Yeah. So in summary, Aaron is more skeptical than I when it comes to, you know, whether or not this is a watershed moment. But I think regardless, we believe that change will come of this for this segment, and we're interested to see what happens next.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I would say I'm most skeptical of the gaming side of things, if I'm honest. Well, not most, probably second most. First most is 2 hours of battery life ain't gonna get you through a movie. And if you're watching a movie in your headset, unless you're syncing it up with someone else's headset, at which point you've spent $7,000, you know, why are you not just watching it on your normal TV? You know, outside of that, I think the product will be well received for its technology, and I think that if there's enough, positive reception to it when it finally launches to consumers, that the device itself will spawn another device, which will spawn another device, and by Gen 3 or Gen 4, we're probably going to be looking at, well, we could be looking at something that will perhaps fundamentally change the world as much as the smartphone did, because we all have them now.
No.
You know, if they can reduce the form factor, then it could genuinely, I mean, it could kill the entire actual TV screen market. Like, Samsung would be SOL in terms of TV sales. So yeah, no. I'm very skeptical of the product, because on some level I do still agree with Paul Tassi from that Forbes article that I mentioned, or you mentioned earlier, that it's kind of repackaged VR hype. I think the broader appeal still isn't quite there, but if it's as impressive as it seems to be, it could be the first step towards mainstreaming MR and AR, and, you know, leaving VR to the gaming space and making MR and AR a much more realistic sort of pitch for general consumers. But I think it's going to take about 2 or 3 seasons, or 2 or 3 iterations rather.
Well, I think on that note, though, we're good.
We're done
to go to the thank yous. So
yes,
I'll just, I heard a weird noise in my house. I want to thank Beach Girl real quick I'm going to spice it up a little bit, Aaron, switch it up on you. I'm going to thank Beach Girl real quick for our wonderful intro and outro theme. You can check out Beach Girl's groovy beats on anywhere where you can find lovely music streaming. So Spotify, Bandcamp, probably Apple Music as well, although I haven't checked there. Give it a look, give it a try. We love them and we would appreciate it.
Yes, it is a treat for the ears. I've also not checked Apple Music, but hey, they might be on there as well. But I suppose since we're doing a quick flip on this one, I might as well thank eDougie Art. eDougie Art is the fine purveyor of our wonderful album cover art, which is what I've decided to call it this week. Zach usually waffles betwixt 3 or 4 different options, but no, it looks fantastic. They're fantastic. And her husband actually just had a recent birthday, so happy birthday to Andrew. And we really appreciate them. You can also find them on their Etsy store, which is at the same name, eDougie Art. And you can find their links in our show notes any given time. I promise you, you will not be disappointed by the designs. They are A+. And dare I say, many of them even more appealing and certainly cuter than our album cover. We had a specific vibe. But no, they're fantastic. So check them out, as well as Beach Girl. Actually, you know what? How about this? I got an idea, Zach.
Oh, no. This wasn't
People
rehearsed.
should look at eDougie Art's art while they listen to Beach Girl's music.
Oh, that might be a good idea. You could.
That's a pretty good idea, I think. I feel like
they
they might pair fairly well, actually, as it turns out. So hey, give that a try. It's like playing Dark Side of the Moon backwards. Unlocks all the secret messages. But outside of that, I suppose we're ready to sign off and give you our goodbyes.
Yep. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate it, and we will see you next time.
Yes, indeed. And remember, eating too much Tabasco hurts.
Probably.
My name is Aaron.
My name's Zach. See y'all later.
Goodbye! It was a bad time for Aaron. Aaron is a large baby man,